Big day, bro. Big day. First day is always, getting rid of the nerves and, stage one. It's a challenge, and bringing yourself up mentally for that, and, dealing with the nerves and making sure your vehicle's ready and prepared is the key. Very important. Key. So after gathering our supplies in Cooktown, we headed off to Laura, and we got there late in the afternoon. So we decided to have a camp on the Laura River, which was a dried up bed at that time of year, and a great little spot to have a camp for the night. And just down the road from Laura is the beginning of the old coach road. Okay, so on this trip we're taking the 76 series Black Knight and of course the 78 series Torpedo. On this vehicle here we've a couple of different setups to the troop carrier. Okay, we've got the electronic shock control system from Superior Engineering, which will turn all that mechanical energy into thermal energy in the oil and the shocks. I can control those from inside the cab, and I'm looking forward to that feature. Certainly have the big Maxxis tyres. We've got the diff locks. Okay, we've got a Harrop diff lock in the front, and in the rear we've got the Mace auto locker. So I'm curious to see how that performs, having not trialled it off-road before. It has a 4-inch lift in it. The Torpedo, on the other hand, has a 3-inch lift in it. Okay, and the Torpedo, uniquely compared to the Black Knight, is in its traditional mode of being leaf sprung. Okay, now this suspension on this vehicle is a 2.5 remote res Superior Engineering shock with airbag man airbags, but which will let all the air out of. So curious to see how these two setups compare and contrast on this track to give you guys some good feedback. So the Black Knight has a Superior Engineering bolt-on coil conversion kit. Now the airbag that we use for this kit is a coil airbag that sits inside the coil tower. To take air out of those bags, I have the old-fashioned nipple here on the back and just release air out of it that way. So I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit nervous. On this track here, it's obviously very dangerous, and on this trip, for the first time, I've got these two vehicles together, and I've got some friends driving them. So that's always a big thing for anyone, is to hand your babies over to someone else. So if there's tension in my voice, it's purely natural. Let's do it. The reputation of the old coach road precedes itself. We'd heard quite a bit about this track. I had no previous knowledge of it, but I knew that it was one of the most difficult tracks in the Cape York area, and there was a lot of trepidation on our behalf as we approached it. This track is definitely a low-range track. Gnarly rocks, boulders, heavy articulation, winching opportunities. This track will test your vehicle to the limits. At a length of 76 kilometres, you wouldn't think the old coach road is going to take you that long. But think again, it's a gnarly track, as I've mentioned, and you're going to be taking it very slow. We'd heard about 7 to 9 hours of solid driving in low range will get you there. But with us, we were filming, so that was going to take us probably around 2 to 3 days. Ideally only 2 though. Obviously the most important thing on any track like this, or any remote track like this, is safety. You want to have enough food and water to cover yourself for a few days. You want to have your GME EPIRB sorted, your sat phone, anything that's going to decrease the risk in case of a major incident occurring.
How are those electronic shocks going?
Hey, they're great. I've got them set on the softest setting here, and yeah, it's really smoothed out the ride, so far so good.
Very nice.
Yeah man, I love it. All right, so we've been traveling down the old coach road from Laura for about 15-20k now. It's freaking boiling out here. At about that point, you'll come to a fork in the road. You've got the Jawalbina Aboriginal camp down that way, and this is the turnoff that we're taking. So as you can see, 4-wheel drive required, no services. So you need your sat phone and your GME EPIRB. After having heard of the notorious reputation of the old coach road, the first section was very easy, and we were wondering if we actually had the right track. Certainly past the Jalbina Nature Reserve, it gets hectic. But up until that point, you don't even need to air down your tyres. So one of the things we needed to do to make a trip like this possible and take the two vehicles was find a couple of reliable and trustworthy drivers. Not the easiest task, but I was very lucky on this occasion. Sam McClary, a very experienced four-wheel driver, has a 79 series of his own, so I didn't have any qualms about him driving either of these vehicles. And then Mitch. Mitch is a beginner, so he was going to need some more tuition as we went down some of these gnarly tracks, but he was up for the challenge, and that's the main thing. Now the first quarter of the old coach road consists of some moderate inclines and some dry river crossings, nothing too hectic, but we found it a great opportunity for us to sharpen our teeth and start to get our vibe going on, working as a new team. Okay, so we've just pulled up here because now is a good time to air down the airbags before we hit Maytown. Well, if speed kills on-road, it definitely does off-road. You really want to take your time on a track like the old coach road. It's gnarly AF. Get out of the vehicle, assess your line, and take it very slowly, and have your spotter there to guide you the whole way. I think looking at wheel line, look, one's going to hit there, one's going to hit there. It'd probably bring you up level. Personally, I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze when there's a track right next door for clever people, not chickens. So I mean, you know, comparing it to this side, this is super easy, it's level, we're in the middle of nowhere. Why risk rolling the vehicle over or damaging the vehicle? We've got loads of Ks to go, loads of tracks to go. So yeah, we'll just cruise on up here, and even that looks fairly challenging up there in a couple of spots, but less challenging than that, yeah?
Yep.
So for anyone out there who has an expensive vehicle, it's always a little bit nerve-wracking to throw the keys to your mate who you haven't seen driving before. I was no different. I was a bit uptight, watching the boys like a hawk, a bit of a SpongeBob SquarePants, got my knickers twisted every now and then. What gear was he in?
Just a little bit heavier.
Give it like a little bit of
Yeah.
handle through that bit, but
So, yeah.
Good learning.
Yeah, man, and you know, it certainly increases the blood pressure when you stall it in a fucked up position. But you know, you maintained your awareness and you got through it. So well done.
good stuff.
But we started to loosen up as the trip went on, and I trusted the boys to get the job done with my full confidence.
Step up rock shelves here. Nothing weird or unusual. Keep it out to the left here. Around the bend here, and we've got a bit of a shelf to get up. Now, both wheels will probably hit that at a similar time, but it should be alright. Alright, here we go. Yeah, probably a bit more squirt than I wanted. Throttle control wasn't great, but I'm no foul. There's a bit of a step up there, bro. It's like... Coach Road, and if you take a look outside you can see some of the burnt leaves from a recent bushfire that's gone through here, but also the bright green new growth that's starting to kick on through now too, which gives it this great contrast. It's beautiful, beautiful colours. Oh my god, these
coils, the dogs. Amazing. You know, this is the first time I've had a really good chance to test out the coil conversion since the last 2 years on a really gnarly, mogully track. And God, it is amazing. I think everyone should have the coil conversion on their vehicles. And to be honest, I really wasn't saying that 2 years ago. I sort of take it or leave it. But after doing this track with these new shocks, it's a no-brainer. It really is. Mate, we're really moving now. The track is certainly smoothed out in this section down here towards Maytown. So, you know, you could nearly put it in, full high. And, well, you can still come undone on these tight chicanes here if you scrape a panel on a tree, but a lot smoother, which is great. So at this point, we reckon we were about 10 to 15k from Maytown. And given that the track hadn't been that difficult up until this point, we knew it was going to be a fairly solid 10 or 15k of low range ahead of us. So at this point, we'd been travelling for around 7 to 8 hours, and we were all in agreement that we weren't going to make Maytown today. Time to get some rest in, recuperate, and hit the tracks tomorrow feeling much more refreshed. So with day one over, let's have a chat to Mitch and Sam and get their thoughts on day one of the old coach road. So here we are about 10 k's north of Maytown on the old coach road, and I'm relieved to say we made it this far without incident. Sure, there were some gnarly, steep sections with some mogully tracks and that sort of thing that required a look and a second look, but we made it through okay. Now, some thoughts on the vehicle itself. The Black Knight, my God, this vehicle is an animal, an absolute animal, right? The coil conversion with these shocks is mint. And okay, yeah, I'm aligned with Superior, but you know what? I don't care what you think. This is the best setup four-wheel drive I've ever driven. Okay, so take from that what you will. So in a moment, I'm gonna have a chat to my other drivers as well to get some of their feedback from their experiences on one of Cape York's most difficult tracks. So as mentioned previously, we have both vehicles here, obviously. One of the drivers for those vehicles, or both of the vehicles to my right here, is Sam McClary. How you doing, mate?
Very well,
Thanks for coming along. I really appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Sam, you drove the Black Knight and also the Torpedo. What are your thoughts on the differences between the handling of the two?
Very different. The Black Knight just seems to meander through stuff. You know, very little cab roll. You get in the Torpedo with the leaf springs and it seems to move around a lot.
It bounces out of those moguls too, doesn't it?
It really does, yeah. And, you know, throttle's a lot different in the Torpedo against this thing. You know, you barely need it sort of poking up the hills in the night, and the Torpedo's, you know, being a little bit heavier and leaf sprung is
a lot heavier, really.
Yeah, sort of need to jump it over things, you know. So.
Yeah. So overall, if I'm reading between the lines, would you say the Black Knight was a more enjoyable ride?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Hopefully I get back in it tomorrow.
Do I have to be worried that you're going to steal it?
No.
Excellent. All right, so there you have it, Sam's thoughts on driving these two vehicles. Certainly the Black Knight coming out in front. All right, so my second driver to my right here is Mitch. Now, Mitch is a newbie in the four-wheel driving world. He hasn't done a lot of off-roading, and it wasn't really fair to bring him into this track first, but hey, suck it up, hey, Mitch.
Yeah, that's it. Got my cherry busted today.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so tell us a little bit about, firstly, how you felt this morning with this notorious track in front of you, and how you felt the track was for you. What helped you get through it, and also how are you feeling now?
This morning I was pretty nervous. I think going over the information out there and people's past experience and reviews of the track left me a little bit nervous, saying that it's basically the hardest track in Cape York.
Yeah, it's kind of like, buckle up, hey?
Yeah, thrown in the deep end a bit, but the experience of the track was a lot different than how I was feeling this morning. And I think that's due to not only the vehicles, but the people, guiding me through this experience.
Yeah, I forgot to say, Sam, he has a lot of experience off-road, and you know, we sort of decided that he was going to mentor Mitch through these tracks, which, you know, how did you feel about that?
Yeah, so that's basically ghosted Sam for the first part, and that was really good. I got to see a lot of how he controlled the car. Pretty much basically became a sponge for that first part, watching his throttle control, the lines he picked, what gears he was in, what revs where he was at certain points. And that really put me in a good position and made me feel comfortable to a point where I could take on this track and feel very comfortable now.
Yeah. So you're no stranger to driving a car, but these are turbo diesel V8s. Any thoughts on what you found the most challenging differences between these kinds of vehicles?
Yeah, so my experience lies more in petrol street cars. They're a lot more, you know, you can give them a lot more and they're less forgiving, whereas the cruisers, they've got a lot of bottom end torque. You don't have to worry about stalling. They can poke through things you really didn't think you'd be able to poke through.
The whole low range thing is a whole other kettle of fish, right?
It is. That to be honest, that took me the hardest to get over, just because I'm used to, it goes against everything I've ever sort of learnt with cars. So
Yeah, sure.
my natural instincts to, you know, give it some herbs, or not let it drop in revs, whereas the cruisers is completely opposite. And
Yeah.
it took a little while to get used to, but once I got used to it, it was really
You found your groove.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. Kind of it.
So how do you feel now compared to when you started?
Amazing. It's been one of the best days I've had.
You're welcome.
Cheers, brother. I feel good. I don't want to get too overconfident because that's when people get up the arse.
Yeah, sure, I've done that. I used an EPIRB to call me out of here. Expensive taxi.
But it's been an amazing trip. I feel great. We've had some amazing views, gone through some cool terrain. But honestly, and again, due to the vehicles and the experienced people to guide me through this, it's not as difficult as I thought it would be. I think if you're a beginner and you have some experienced people through you, you can totally do this track.
Great feedback there. Thanks, Mitch. Certainly, as a beginner, it's going to be tough if you haven't got good people around you in a competent vehicle, capable vehicle. But as you've just heard, it can be done. So hopefully everyone's confident for tomorrow. I'm certainly feeling better than I was this morning. So on to the next bit. Certainly day one on the old coach road was not too difficult, I must say. But just like an oil leak on your swivel hub, I had the feeling we hadn't seen the worst of it.